Let's stick with this energy here. We're talking tactics, maybe positionally right now, but let's shift a little bit to maybe what we could be seeing on the pitch. And again, I want to shout out the episode that we did with Melissa Ortiz talking about Colombia kind of inspired this next segment. Shout out to Kick Out Coffee.
Look at the coffee. Lori's got it. She's ready to go for these late night matches happening.
Yeah. Looking at let's identify maybe this middle third here, because this is something that we asked Melissa and we want to maybe bring up to you too as well, Lori. What we might see work out for Colombia, maybe an advantage that they could have or an opportunity in front of them. And she kind of talked a little bit about their midfield and how maybe that could be an area of strength for that team to go ahead and lean on. When you're looking at sort of maybe the tactical lineups or sort of the tactical things positionally here in the middle third between these two teams, what are you going to be looking at here?
Well, I'll be looking to see who is starting in our three, right? I mean, there has been a lot of dialogue and discussion around the only true number 6 being brought in is Andi Sullivan. So then how does, and listen, we've had a lot of discussion too about, okay, so then how, it doesn't look like there's going to be any changes in terms of formation, right? And I don't think you need to, but how does that look? How do players play differently? What does that look like, again, in terms of the opposition? So Andi Sullivan, no doubt, will be, I feel, to be the 6 in there, and how does she control the game? But then let's say Lindsey Herrera and Rose Lavelle are playing in there. How does that adjust Lindsey Herrera's? What is the direction that's given to her in terms of her game? Does she drop back a little bit to help set play too? Does Huerta, who's the outside back, pinch into number 6 when they're in possession as well, right? Like there's different factors that you can plug in and little different principles of play that adjust how the U.S. is playing. So, in terms of Melissa Ortiz, I like what she said, and she spoke about Catalina for one of the players specifically coming in who could lead this team, and they're going to be their strong suit in the midfield. So I'll be curious about, Colombia and how they set up, and then how do we adjust, right? No doubt, listen, you're talking about our front three, they've been dynamite in the NWSL so far. There's going to be pressure. It's going to put Colombia's defense right from the get-go, right? We've seen that time and time again. But then as the game settles in, then how do we make adjustments? And I also think to Melissa's point, they have a lot of fresh faces coming into their team. But I think in a lot of ways, for some of these nations, gone are the days where they're the U.S., right? Players are playing consistently. They're playing professionally. They're now, how do you deal with the pressure of the U.S. and our ability to attack in numbers and continue to put on players is a whole other thing. But I think that they're going to come out and they're going to utilize their midfield, and they're going to say, hey, let's try to play. Let's try to keep the ball and be mindful about their positioning. So I think that'll be an interesting adjustment, and it'll call for action for Andi to step in and dictate play. And I'm excited about that because I think Andi in this first part of the NWSL hasn't had a lot of consistent minutes coming back from injury, right? And there has been rotation previously in that 6th position with the national team. So I think it's a really great opportunity for her.
It's going to be a huge test.
Right, you get it.
It's going to be a test for them, and not in a test the way that some fans are going to say, if the scoreline ends up being a bit lopsided, because it's still a test of the consistency and how this team and this group of players can problem solve on the pitch, because so much of it is how Colombia is going to set up, right? Vlatko Andonovski and this midfield, or rather the entire 11 on the pitch, can have a game plan as to what they want to do. But if they realize in the first 5 minutes of this match that Colombia has overloaded their midfield and they've really stacked a lot of players in there to make it very congested, how does the United States respond to that and react to that? And a lot of that problem solving is going to stem from Andi Sullivan. And if she can be the problem solver in those situations and finding the space and creating more space, whether that's dropping back and opening up that midfield a little bit. Lori, one thing you mentioned that I thought was very interesting, perked up my ears on that, is a double pivot in the 6, or rather if a Sofia Huerta on the outside will come in. I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't. In terms of how the United States has historically played against Colombia. These two teams played in January of 2021. And in that match, where the midfield for Colombia was also very strong, a lot of the space was on the flank. And a player like Sofia Huerta is someone that you want to keep out wide. Although she can play in the middle and she can problem solve because she is so versatile, her strengths are on the width of the field and getting the ball into the space, combining with those midfield players, bringing herself farther down the field into attacking positions. So I don't foresee a Huerta or an O'Hara, whoever the outside backs may be, a Fox, cutting inside in that moment.
Okay, yeah, let me explain a little bit more then what I'm saying, because like, let's say Fox does have the ball and she's providing the width, right? And it's on the other side. I'm not saying Huerta's just going to cut inside all the time. I'm saying you don't ultimately want Huerta and Sophia Smith, if they're playing on the right side, staying in the exact same line, because that's predictable. And when teams are organized defensively, which Colombia will be, then if you're just staying in the same plane or on the same line, then you're defended easily, right? So when you think about verticality and the movements, then let's say it's Roosevelt. Where is Roosevelt pulling out to? Is she going to be out wide a little bit? Is Sophia Smith going to cut in? Then you do need a Huerta to pinch in a little bit. And we do see her with OL Reigns. And we've seen her hit a brilliant goal early on in the season. It might have even been in the Challenge Cup by pinch in on top of the 18, right?
Yeah, so like a weak side pinch in, a weak side coverage to support.
But even if the ball is on that side, yes, I agree that Huerta is excellent in the wide areas, but you also have to look at what the game's giving you. And so if Sophia Smith is providing the width, then again, does it do any good if Huerta's just providing the width in the same plane as well? So how does the fluidity work in terms of not being, it's angles, right? Soccer's angles. So it's angles, it's where you're moving. And one of the reasons why I really enjoy Huerta's game, and we see this with Fox on the other side, and Crystal Dunn when she's playing, absolutely, having a bit of a free role on what that looks like. And that doesn't mean you're just going down the line and crossing the ball. Like, they all have the understanding and the ability to be able to cut in at times. And when I say a double pivot, I'm not saying that Huerta is also just sitting next to Andi Sullivan, but in the men's game, we have seen this with Bayern Munich. They do have a player as their outside back that steps in as the 6 in possession to also like be in a place of like, when the ball does turn over, do they have cover? But then also when it does turn over or they do keep possession, you have proper angles to be able to work off of that. And if you're not going to play a true 2 holding, then how do you manipulate the game in a way?
How do you create that coverage?
Around? Yeah. Now listen, I'm not saying that's going to happen against Colombia, and it is options is what I'm saying, right? And as the game evolves, and we've seen this with players, and the outside backs for our team continue to evolve in their free role, which the players that we have in those positions should, then these are options that are available, right?
I love talking about these options.
Given that I don't foresee a formation change, nor does it necessarily have to happen, right? So
no, I agree. And I love talking about these options, and that's why I'm going to continue to pick your brain here. So when we look at our front line and the options that are there, right? Like Alex Morgan is going to play that 9, that center striker, which is a very different look than someone like Catarina Macario, who is not called in ACL injury. Very unfortunate. So now it shifts a little bit as to what that front line is going to look like, because say if a Macario is in there, she's one that's really going to drop back and play almost a false 9 and rotate with that midfield. How do you see the rotation from the central midfielders or the attacking midfielders and that front line, whether it's centrally or out on the flank? Do you see anything different there based on the personnel?
Well, I do see. I mean, you're completely right. I mean, that's a totally different player, Alex Morgan to Catarina Macario, right? But Alex Morgan also can play back to goal, and she also, as we saw over the weekend, with a little connection of her and Taylor Korniak, she can clearly make the runs of like inside out. I mean, listen, she scored. Listen, this is her first call up in a while, but she scored how many goals at the international level? We're not talking somebody who's never been at this level before. So, yeah, I think the exciting thing about the U.S. team is when you look at these players, a lot of them are vastly different, right? So they're giving you a different look. So I think, in some cases, how does that look with Alex Morgan? How does Mal Pugh play? We see her with Chicago almost drop back as a midfielder. Will we see that in with the U.S.? And then how can she link up with Alex Morgan? I do think in these games, though, we will see Alex Morgan play a bit more back to goal and be a little bit of an outlet to link up with the midfielders, because I do expect at times, not always, Colombia to get compact defensively, have numbers behind the ball. So, I'm not so sure there'll be a ton of space in behind. Now, we have been wrong about that before. I've been wrong because there are games in April, right? Like, I didn't expect Uzbekistan to come out and play high line, and they did.
Yep.
Goodness, was there loads of space, right?
So you never know, honestly.
I do think it depends on how Colombia decides they want to utilize these games, right? And that goes back to my point about gone are the days where teams are like, oh, let's just sit back and be as compact as possible. And like teams are like, no, we are advancing our play, we want to get better. Here we go.
These are also the games to do that, though. Like I'm just like sitting, I feel like I'm part of the audience here listening to the two of you. Like I'm just like, yes, because part of that is I think these are the two types of games in which they can do that, because these are, like, we refer to them at the top of this segment as kind of the tune-up, and these are two teams that both have bigger pictures in front of them. So I'm with you, Lori. I'm curious as to maybe if we are going to see something a little bit different from the Colombian side specifically.
And that's something that Melissa Ortiz alluded to in our episode about Colombia. She said how she was almost disappointed that Colombia was playing the United States right before their World Cup qualifiers, because this is an exhausting game to defend and to chase because of the high energy, the transition, the high press that the United States puts on opponents. So I'm thinking that we might see something a little different from Colombia in terms of the fluidity of the game. Whereas in certain moments of the game, Colombia is going to attack and they're going to look to put their offense and pose it onto the United States. And then there are going to be other moments where they almost sit back and try to catch their breath, but I don't mean it like that. More just sit back and assess defensively. Okay, what can we do now in those types of moments? So I really think it's going to be a game that is going to require the players to read in game what's happening and adjust on the fly as to what the opponent is giving them on both sides of it for Colombia and the United States, and then how to make those adjustments in game on the fly based on the personnel that they have already on the pitch.